talk about this current program. At the time of recording, we're almost through it, but I still want to pick your brain on how it is you come together to curate something from a distance with our artistic team here.
Well, it's always a really interesting process, and now I'm on a different side of it, because it used to be I was on the receiving end of all of the guests' ideas, and we had all of our ideas. Well, now Gustavo has, a dozen programs plus every year. So when I come in and start chatting with the team, I basically am trying to find out what Gustavo isn't conducting, or hasn't conducted in the last year or two, or it doesn't want to conduct next year. That's the nature of it. The music director gets to choose their repertoire, and that's really important for the orchestra, right? Because there's a journey for a music director in the relationship with the orchestra, and you want to have a nice balance of, probably classical and, early music and romantic music and 20th century music and contemporary music, etc. In this particular case, I really wanted to try to do a piece that I had never conducted with the Toronto Symphony. And there are not that many pieces that one would really love to do. I mean, I was here for a long time, so we did a lot of repertoire. And I have just fallen in love with Rachmaninoff's Third Symphony in the last couple of years. I just think it's the most beautiful piece, and it's very rarely played. This orchestra has played it once in the last 25 years or something like that. So that was the beginning, actually. Let's do Rachmaninoff Third. And that seemed to work for the team here. And then I had just gotten to know the person I consider one of the greatest saxophone players in the history of the instrument, Stephen Banks. I was judging a competition, Young Concert Artists in New York, and he walks on stage and plays the Mozart Oboe Quartet on saxophone with strings. And everyone's going, oh, what's this going to be like? And it was exquisite. The most beautiful music making, incredible sound, control of phrasing, everything. And I started to say to him, come on, you got to play stuff with me. So we've done many concerts together in different places, including this John Adams saxophone concerto, a piece the Toronto Symphony has also never played. It's about 10 or 11 years old now. So we decided to ask Stephen, and it makes a really nice contrast with the Rachmaninoff, actually. And that's what you're looking for. Sometimes you want to do an all Mozart program or whatever, something very, or the Messiah, or whatever. And other times, a complete contrast to that concept, which is to give people like a meal, like a really interesting meal. And that's what we've got. We have Katerina Guimon. She's written a new piece for us about the stars and the city lights. It's very pure, very beautiful. It's commissioned by the orchestra. That's how the program came together. A nice commission, a masterpiece of today, which has been played quite a lot, but never in Toronto, and then a great symphony that our audiences here have heard very rarely.
What do you appreciate the most about the diversity of our programming when it comes to, you can have a concerto, you can have a symphony that isn't played as often as perhaps as it should, and also new works? What do you appreciate about the legacy that is being perpetuated?
Well, there are a lot of reasons why people come to concerts, but one of them has to be curiosity, right? So if you want to fulfill people's curiosity, you better be giving them things that they haven't heard before. So that's just one of the most essential aspects of this consideration. It's also really important for us as musicians, because if we keep on playing the Beethoven and Brahms and Schubert, we're happy, it's beautiful, but we don't have the good fortune to have the experience of taking a piece that's never been played and figuring out how to put that piece across. What is the real narrative? Because it's one thing to play the notes and get the rhythms right and the dynamics right. It's another thing to tell the story of the piece. That requires imagination, a sharing of ideas, the use of vocabulary that works for us, because we want to be able to say, this should be a little faster, or it should be a little loud. This needs to sound more anxious, for example. I mean, just any kind of adjective like that speaks to all of us. Well, having done that with a brand new piece, then we go back and play a Beethoven symphony. In a way, we start to treat it as if it's never been played before. And that gives that a freshness.
You perform it at two locations, here at Roy Thomson Hall and also at George Weston Hall, a venue that you're very familiar with, that you've performed in many times. What do you appreciate the most about the acoustics at George Weston Hall?
Well, in George Weston Hall, it's probably 1/3 of the volume, maybe 1/4 of the volume.
Yeah.
I mean, if we look at Roy Thomson Hall before the renovation, it's probably 1/8 of the volume, because I mean, this is now like 2/3 of the volume that it was originally. But so it's a very, very different experience, and you must play in such a way to let your sound just come out of the instrument easily. You don't have to project your sound in the same way that it's important to know how to do in this wonderful but large hall. So there's that. We also play with smaller string group, actually, partly because there's just no room, and partly because it would overwhelm. The danger is you go into George Weston Hall and you just overplay, and people are like, wow, it's like this wind coming at them, there's blustering them, and it gets in their ears in a way that irritates them. You have to always play for that instrument. The hall is our instrument. And it's always been a really beautiful sounding hall. I played string quartets when it was brand new in the George Weston Hall. And nicest memory, though, I have Richard Bradshaw, to whom we owe a lot in this city, and of course the Opera House. When he died rather suddenly, it was a very sad moment for all of us, and many of us were very close to him. And we were about to do a Beethoven 9 up there, and we dedicated it to his memory, and it was very, very. I mean, that piece is always moving, but when you have something very specific to commemorate and to think about and to memorialize, it becomes imprinted in your memory in a special way.
Having been in Toronto for so long, and now you're coming back occasionally to perform at the TSO, what do you appreciate about what's changed about the music in the city and the TSO's role, and also what's stayed the same?
Of course, a lot of that has been affected by the pandemic. That was a very, very difficult time for everyone to get through on every level, but for performing artists, it was extremely difficult. What is gratifying is that the audiences are really coming back. That is very exciting, because this orchestra should be heard by everyone in the city. Everyone should just choose a program they think they might enjoy and just come down and hear it. After all, it's not all that expensive to come to the Symphony. I mean, there are a lot of very reasonable tickets, and every seat is good in the hall. But what hits me, of course, every time I come is that there are all these new faces. It's incredible. I mean, I hired like over 40 people, but it seems to me that there's been at least about 15 new hires or something, from what I can tell, just in those few years since I left. And so I come in and I see all these incredibly young, wonderful players contributing in their way, and adding to the beauty of sound that has always existed, and adding to the energy, of course, to the playing, and to the community of the orchestra. So it's very exciting to come in, because when you play all the time, if you're playing 12 weeks or 14 weeks a year, certain things that even though you shouldn't, you take for granted, and you still get very excited when things go extremely well and the audience is very, very receptive. But when you're only here occasionally, it feels like a real privilege, honestly, to come back and you feel like you know people. I'm the very fortunate position. I walk on stage, I feel like I know the audience. I don't, of course.
You can hardly see them.
But many of them do know me, and they feel they know me. And so that's a very special thing for a former music director. I can't imagine what it's like for Andrew Davis, who stopped being music director here. I don't even remember when, like late 70s or something like that. Yeah. And he's still here very frequently. And I mean, he's a complete fixture for this in a very positive way. But his history with this organization goes way back, way more than 4 decades at this point. So it's a really exciting privilege to have been part of it. It's a little bit like, you've been a little bit of a parent, and then now you can come back and just be an uncle.
I'm sure there's a lot of things that you're doing outside of this role and upcoming for you. So maybe you could get a bit of a glimpse into what the next 6 months or so looks like on your concert schedule. Yeah,
well, I'm spending a lot of time in Colorado nowadays, because I'm the music director of the Colorado Music Festival, which is a fabulous festival in the most beautiful venue in Boulder, Colorado. It's a 5-week festival that goes July into August, and they have a wonderful orchestra with probably 25 different orchestras represented from all around North America, including one member of the Toronto Symphony, actually. And we do beautiful programming, very interesting programming, and we also have a chamber music series there. So we bring in some of the greatest string quartets from all over the world, and then chamber music for our own players. So that is quite an operation for me, because I've got to create every festival from scratch, and then I spend the entire time there, and I conduct most of the concerts, not all of them. We invite guests as well. Then I'm also heading up the Colorado Symphony. So I've become a sort of a Coloradan, you know. I mean, I've always loved the mountains. My wife is Swiss; she loves the mountains. Right. So I spend many weeks a year in Colorado, in Denver, doing the similar kinds of things that I had been doing here for so many years. And then with guest conducting, I go quite frequently to orchestras like Atlanta and Baltimore. I was in Chicago last year, and Seattle. You know, there are wonderful orchestras all over the country. I was talking to one of our colleagues here in Toronto about all these new players coming in and just how brilliantly they play. And that, very fortunately, is the case in many other cities across the country, where you have a vacancy and 100 people may turn up to get one position in the cello section of an orchestra. And you can. Then the final round is like an international cello competition. You know, it's like they play so brilliantly. You feel guilty that you can't hire them all. So yeah, a lot of that kind of stuff. And I'm still involved in my 43rd year at the Yale School of Music. You know, I mean, I went straight out of college. I had to teach at Yale because I joined the Turco String Quartet, and they've been very kind and never got rid of me. So I'm still there, and I conduct 4 concerts a year with the wonderful Yale Philharmonia. They're all graduate students. They come out of wonderful schools, including several have come from Toronto, actually, over the years. So I get this great opportunity to work with young people, and they start off reading, and it's not like the Toronto Symphony reading something, which is already pretty fabulous. Right. They're finding their way, but then you spend maybe 6 rehearsals with them, and then you have a concert, and they are so thrilled at the fact that they're playing at this high level. So there's something very exciting about that, which I enjoy tremendously.
We'll end it with your baton, which is conveniently in arm's length here.
Yes.
So what's the story behind it? Do you remember who the maker is?
The maker of all my batons, and I try not to break them too often, but it does happen, was a player in the first violin section of the Pittsburgh Symphony. And a lot of conductors contacted him because he made beautiful batons. Now, the handle is cork, because, we do sometimes perspire, and cork is very good. It doesn't get slippery.
It absorbs.
It absorbs, and there's a friction as well, a little bit, which makes it a little bit Velcro-like, right? Just a touch. But the key, everybody likes a baton of a particular length. This works for me. It's not a particularly long baton, but it has a feeling that I can, with the tip of the baton, still do a lot of expression. If it was an inch or 2 longer, of course the tip would move that much further. So, I've been using this kind of baton for 28 years or something like that. And then the other part of it is the weight and the balance. Because the fact that I can do this with this baton, it's not that I would really conduct like this, but that it floats like that is wonderful. You can see that it floats, but it just moves a little bit. And so once I hold it, I don't lose that feeling. It still feels as if it's floating. Now, of course, there's times when you're grabbing at everybody needs complete clarity. That's different. But especially for like French music or any kind of delicate music, when people see this, instinctively, that's what we do. This is like our bows and our breath.
Peter, thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
It's such a pleasure to have you back.
Great to be here.